merciful, ever merciful. And may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we will inshallah try to discuss a topic that may seem at first glance to be quite simple, but which over the past few years has become one of the most researched and one of the most controversial topics related to the tragedy of Karbala and the events surrounding Imam al-Husain alayhi salam in Karbala. And that topic is the one of trying to find out what are the main purposes behind the movement of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam. Were the real purposes of the Imam falling under the category of what we can call the social and humanitarian reasons? Were they more political reasons, or were they more religious reasons? If we start with the theory and the scholars who have talked about the social theory, or the theory that says that the main purposes behind the events of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam moving an uprising leading to the tragedy of Karbala, they start by giving as evidence the social reality of that world. And I think we started to explore a lot of that until now. The reality of the world that Imam al-Husain alayhi salam lived in, and even before, was a very difficult social reality. There was poverty, there was cruelty, there was killing, there was oppression, and this was a lot worse when it came to the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. That reality was even worse. People were not really allowed to participate in social life as we would know it today. People were prevented from participating fully in financial, economic activities. People were prevented from being able to make social choices as they wanted. They would be beaten, they would be punished, they would be tortured, they would be exiled, they would be put under house arrest, and they would be killed. In a lot of cases, it was because of their either what was considered to be their political or their religious affiliation. So in today's terms, we would say that they lacked the basic human rights to live freely and with dignity. So this is the first theory, in that Imam al-Husain alayhi salam, in the context that he was in, he recognized that he needed to intervene, he needed to do something about that kind of social context. Things could not remain as is. They reached a point where the Imam had to do something. That's one theory. A second theory related to the movement of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam says no. We have to look at all the events of Karbala and the tragedy of Ashura, and we have to interpret them in a manner that today we would call political. Every decision of the Imam needs to be looked at as though it is a political decision. So if we start looking at the events even before the tragedy of Karbala, right from when the Imam was in Al-Madinah, right from then we would start looking at all of the actions, all of the sermons, all of the decisions of the Imam as falling under the general category of political actions. When the Imam started his movement from Al-Madinah, then he moved to Mecca to perform his pilgrimage, and then he cut it short. He received the letters from Al-Kufa, and then he started moving, giving the impression that he had accepted the invitation of Al-Kufa. So he started moving towards Al-Kufa. He sent Muslim ibn Aqil, as we mentioned, as his ambassador to prepare the ground for him in Kufa. And then along the way, the sermons that the Imam gave all fall under the political category. And then we see that the Imam actually negotiated at some point with Al-Hurr, who was trying to prevent him from either going back or continuing where he wanted to. And then he negotiated again. Once he reached Karbala, he negotiated again with Umar ibn Sa'd, asking them to allow him to go elsewhere if they did not want him to stay there. And the manner in which they interpret all of this, they say Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam basically behaved and conducted himself in a completely political manner. When this is taken to its full extent, this argument says, because the Imam's entire purpose was political, then we have to assess his entire movement in a political light. Which means that the Imam alayhi salam actually made a political mistake. He made politically or strategically, he made some mistakes. His movement was for noble causes. He moved in the right direction, he had everything right, but he miscalculated some things, and in the end, he was martyred and he was killed. And this is a tragedy. But the problem with this is that it goes against the idea that we hold, which is that the Imam is divinely appointed and infallible. And the entire crux of this argument rests on one argument, in that while the Imam, because his movements need to be seen as though they are political, had the Imam known that he was going to be killed, the Imam would not have proceeded in that manner. And they say if anyone says the opposite, it means the Imam was willing to commit suicide. And this would not be considered strategic or wise for the Imam to embark on a suicide mission. So let's keep that argument in mind. That's a second theory. The third theory basically says the entire movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam needs to be interpreted as though it is a religious movement. And this has two versions. One version says the theory that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam's entire actions and decisions and sermons need to be interpreted based on Islamic law, and they would fall under the general category of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil. And then there is a more spiritual, metaphysical argument that says Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam's entire movement is divinely inspired. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised a rank to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam that can only be attained through enduring and being patient in the tribulations, in the tragedy of Karbala upon himself and his household and the ones that would follow the events of Karbala. So these are the main three theories about the main purposes of the activities of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam related to the tragedy of Karbala. So which one is it? Let's all agree right from the beginning that the social conditions during the time of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam were really bad. And I think we spent enough time talking about some of the persecution and the killing and the oppression that these people were living under. This was definitely a dictatorial, oppressive, tyrannical regime, whether it was during the time of Muawiyah or the time of his son Yazid. And we gave, I think, multiple examples of this. And to add to this, we can also say that it was clear that this person who had become heir, successor to the throne, Yazid, was unfit to rule. And this has been agreed upon by all the historians who have been objectively looking at this throughout history. It is well known that Yazid, even in his time, he was a man, as they say, and they would mock him for this, he would wear gold and silk. And he spent his time surrounded by musicians and women. And he spent his time drunk. And they say that he would play with monkeys. And he had a specific monkey that he liked more than others called Abu Qais. And when Abu Qais died, when that monkey died, Yazid declared 3 days of mourning in the Islamic kingdom out of sorrowness and mourning for his monkey, and a graveyard was built for him. This is the kind of man that he was. He gave absolutely no value to human life. It was about his personal wealth and the wealth of those around him, all for personal gain. There's no disagreement about this. So let's put this aside. We want to look at it a little bit more closely at the political aspect and at the religious aspect. Before we talk about whether it was a political movement or a religious movement, I think we need to introduce a little introduction here. One of the biggest issues we have when people try to assess and analyze the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and their decisions is that a lot of people who do so look at it from only one lens. So they concentrate on the lens that is either of interest to them or because it's their expertise, for instance. So some people are more interested in the social conditions. Some people are more interested, believe it or not, in economic or financial conditions. Some people are more interested in the cultural conditions. Some people are interested in the political conditions. The problem is that any of these conditions, while it is right, is not complete on its own. These are all different lenses that allow us to analyze and to assess a certain situation. But none of these is going to give you a full, accurate picture of a society. And this we well know today too. So no one should be attempting to understand the behavior of the Imams alayhim salam, as has been done a lot, by looking at it from only one lens. And if you do look at it from one lens because you're trying to be academic or scholarly, there is no issue with that, so long as you do not say that this is the exclusive reason why any of the Imams or the Holy Prophet, for instance, behaved in a certain way. All this allows you to say is that looking at it from this lens, looking at it from these factors, we can assess it in a certain way, based on the tools we have, let's say in sociology, or in political science, or in cultural studies. So this is one thing that we need to keep in mind. The second thing we need to keep in mind, I think, is that we need to look at the historical dimension when we assess any situation. And what we mean by that is that today anyone who wants to look at or who wants to assess human behavior, whether it's collective or whether it's by one individual, no one would agree that we would look at it as though it's one layer or it's one dimension. What do we mean by that? If a human being is about to make any decision or do anything big, one of the most obvious parts, so that one we don't need to explain too much, one of the most obvious dimensions historically is that we look at it in terms of the short term and the immediate consequences. So if I'm about to do anything of significance, of importance, before I make my decision, I need to look at the context in which I'm living. And I need to assess it from as many angles as possible to see what are the immediate and short-term repercussions, ramifications, consequences, outcomes of my action. That part should go without saying. So that much we are supposed to give basically pretty much to any human being right now. Then let's move to the next part. Let's talk about someone who is considered brilliant, someone who is considered extremely significant in their field, someone who wants to change their field or leave a mark and make a significant contribution. Let's look at a big corporation that is thinking about completely changing the way they're doing business or merging with another giant in their field. Let's look at a state, a country that wants to change its domestic policies or the way they do foreign policy with another country. When they're about to make these decisions, significant with far-reaching consequences, they're not going to go and look only at the immediate and short-term consequences. They're going to go and look a lot further. They're even going to hire people who specialize in different dimensions to explain to them the trends in society, in technology, in the markets, in politics, so that they understand how to plan properly for the next 5 years or 10 years, or to plan properly over 2 or 3 generations, so that they decide how to do their work now, so that they end up with the consequences that they want and they plan for right now in 50 years. And this is very common. Anyone who understands how these big decisions are made in the world knows that this is part of the general way that people plan and work in the world. So it would be difficult to say that someone who is considered a genius, as we say, if we want to use material language, these people that are associated with the household of the Prophet do not at least take all of this into consideration when they make any decisions or they assess the reality in which they're living. But there's more to that. And the more to that, what I'd like to say is, it comes from the spirit of our religion. Right from the beginning, when the Holy Quran was revealed, there is a sense of history in our Quran. there is a push and an incentive for all followers of the Quran and followers of the Holy Prophet to study history and to understand our place in history and to understand the trends of history throughout the millennia of human history, so that we understand how we fit in and what role we're supposed to play. We are told about the past, and we're told about the short-term future, and we're told about the long-term future. We're told about where humanity is supposed to be going. And with that, of course, there's a call for anyone who wants to be a follower of the Holy Prophet, a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This comes with a call to action. Basically, as a human being, it's not enough for you to think that you're just going to be born and you live your life and you die. You have to understand that you fit into a larger timeline of history. And that means that you have a specific role related to you based on where you are and where you want to contribute in history. We are told that history is going to end in a certain way in the Holy Quran. And if you combine the narrations of the Holy Prophet, that becomes a lot more clear. So what are you doing to align yourself with one path, one trend versus another? Islam does not want you to just go through your life without recognizing and being aware and being sensitive to the fact that you live in a moment in history, and history is going through its course and will end up at some point. And it will look in a certain way. And you need to have done something to align yourself one way or another there. And in fact, more than that, it is as though our religion wants every human being, each and every one of us, to add our own contribution to history. It's as though human history is like an edifice, and each of us needs to bring their own little brick with their name on it and put it in that edifice, in that building that we call the history of humankind. So this is if we look at, generally speaking, what the spirit of our religion is, when the Quran says, what the narrations of the Holy Prophet and Ahlul Bayt say. So I think the least credit we can give to someone like Imam Husain alayhi salam when he acts is to say that in his decisions he is taking into account the very short-term and immediate consequences, and he is also looking into the medium term, and he is also looking into the long and very long term. Brothers, there's a lot of people trying to come from outside and sit. Rahimallah man dhakara al-qa'ima min ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. When we put all of this together, it becomes very important for us to realize that, one, when we're assessing the behavior and the decisions and the actions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we also need to have that type of complexity. We cannot just look at it from one simple angle, as though it's one monolithic thing, and we look at it from one only angle and we say that's enough, and that gives us the full complexity of their decisions and their purposes and their incentives and their motives. And then the other part of that same argument is that all of this, everything that we're saying, whether it has to do with history, whether it has to do with the general ways we assess the behavior of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam for us to understand, of course all of this is so that we reintegrate what we learn from them back into our lives. And for this specific, from this angle, from this specific purpose, the important thing to keep in mind becomes that when we want to do anything, we want to participate in a project or create some sort of endeavor that produces good in society, it means that we have to think in the same manner as well. We have to think about the immediate and short term, but as well as the medium, as well as the long terms. And we have to look at it from every angle, which means we have to understand the societies in which we live from every angle. From the social, cultural, political, religious, and so on and so forth. All of this becomes part of the manner in which we're supposed to always and constantly be thinking. So now with all of this in mind, let's go back to Imam al-Husain alayhi salam and the tragedy of Karbala, to drill down a little bit more in detail to see where in all of this the Imam's actions have to be, which category do they belong to. There is no doubt that some sermons of the Imam, some sayings of the Imam, some actions of the Imam looked like they were extremely simple. It's as though they gave only one purpose. But this is not the case all the time. So what we have to do is to combine them together to try to see what kind of picture it gives us. Where it seems to be that the Imam is referring to only one purpose as motivating him, generally speaking, that purpose is always religion. And this is an important thing to say, because it means that if we're forced to say that there is only one purpose to the movement of Imam Husain alayhi salam, then that purpose has to be a religious purpose. So if we take, for instance, as an example, a letter that Imam Husain alayhi salam wrote to the people of Basra, with whom he was also in communication, there's a line in that letter in which the Imam says, وَأَنَا أَدْعُوكُمْ إِلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَسُنَّةِ نَبِيِّهِ. And as for me, I call you to the book of Allah and the tradition of His Prophet. فإن السنة قد أميتت وإن البدعة قد أحييت وإن تسمعوا قولي وتطيعوا أمري أهدكم سبيل الرشاد. So the Imam continues in his letter saying, for the tradition of the Holy Prophet has been killed and the innovations have been brought to life. And if you listen to me and obey my commands, I shall guide you to the path of success. Now, if you read this at one layer, it looks like the Imam is only referring to the religious dimension. The Imam is talking about the tradition of the Holy Prophet. And he's saying this religion has been completely changed. We need to bring it back to its original state. That's one interpretation. But we could also add here, the Imam is being very general when he says, if you obey me and obey my commands, I shall lead you to the path of success. The Imam is not really qualifying that path. Sabil al-Rashad, the path of success. So this could be interpreted in more ways than one and beyond just a religious aspect. Let's take another example. We mentioned the letter that Imam Husain alayhi salam sent to the people of Kufa along with Muslim ibn Aqil as his ambassador. We already said the letter started by saying, I am sending you my brother and my cousin and the most trustworthy man of my household. That letter is very important, and it's very famous for a line that the Imam uses to end his letter, because it gives the entire theory of imamah, and it needs a lot of explanation which we don't have time to do right now. But again, let us look at these dimensions in these few words of the Imam. So that letter ends with the Imam saying, فَلَعَمْرِي مَا الْإِمَامُ إِلَّا الْعَامِلُ بِالْكِتَابِ وَالْآخِذُ بِالْقِسْطِ وَالدَّائِنُ بِالْحَقِّ وَالْحَابِسُ نَفْسَهُ عَنْ ذَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالسَّلَامِ. So in English the Imam is saying, and certainly an Imam is nothing but a man who abides by the book, so by the Quran. So now we have the religious dimension. Who acts with justice, who follows the truth. So now we're no longer just talking about strictly in the religious sense. There's the social and political dimensions that can be used here. And who disciplines himself in the sake of Allah. This is the definition of an Imam. So now the Imam comes back to the religious dimension. So here what we have is that when we look at the different narrations and sermons from the Imam, yes, he does mention the religious and he mentions other dimensions. And if we have to limit it to one, we have to say the other dimensions are included in the religious dimension. Maybe this is still not completely clear. So let's go into another one of the very famous sermons, very important sermons of the Imam. This is from the book Tuhaf al-Uqul of Al-Harani, a very, very important book for everybody to review. Has some amazing ahadith from Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam, all of them. And so he narrates this short part of a sermon from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam on his way to Karbala. So please keep in mind these different dimensions and see how many of them you can count. And again, I'm just taking a few words from the sermon. The Imam tells the people, or talks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as part of his sermon, and then he addresses the people. He says, Allahumma innaka ta'lamu annahu lam yakun ma kana minna tanafusan fi sultan. He says, O Lord, you know that we are not doing what we are doing because we are competing over a kingdom. So already we have to disqualify the argument that says that the entire movement of the Imam was exclusively political. The Imam is saying, I am not competing over a kingdom. Nor are we trying to touch the leftovers of some heap of coal. So he refers to anything in this life as a heap of coal. And he says, I'm not trying to go after some heap of coal, some leftover from a heap of coal. وَلَا الْتَمَسْنَا مِنْ فُضُولِ الْحُطَامِ. This is not the point. The Imam continues, وَلَكِنْ لِنُرِيَ الْمَعَالِمَ مِنْ دِينِكَ. So the Imam starts by explaining his purposes. And the purpose, it is rather so that we can show the signposts of your religion. وَنُظْهِرَ الْإِصْلَاحَ فِي بِلَادِكَ. So maybe the first was religious. But here the Imam adds, and bring forth social reform in your land. Al-Islaha fi biladik. Very general. And then the Imam continues, وَيَأْمَنَ الْمَظْلُومُ مِنْ عِبَادِكَ. And so that those who are oppressed among your servants may finally feel like they are safe in your land. وَيُعْمَلَ بِفَرَائِضِكَ وَسُنَنِكَ وَأَحْكَامِكَ. And so that the people follow your obligations and your laws and your teachings. The Imam wraps it back again in a religious package. And then the Imam addresses the people and he says, فَإِن لَمْ تَنْصُرُونَا وَتُنْصِفُونَا قَوِيَ الظَّلَمَةُ عَلَيْكُمْ. So if you do not support us with sincerity, then the oppressors are going to become more powerful over you. And here we can interpret it in a religious sense, we can interpret it in a political sense, and we can interpret it in a social sense. And then the Imam continues, وَعَمِلُوا فِي إِطْفَاءِ نُورِ نَبِيِّكُمْ. And then they will work to extinguish the light of your Prophet. So of course this can be interpreted again, yes it is religious, but it could be seen as immediate, but it could also be seen as very far into the future. They will extinguish the light of your Prophet. When we look at these different sermons and these different narrations from the Imam alayhi salam, we start to clearly see a picture of the motives that cannot be limited to only social or only political or only religious. But as we said, if we need to say one, we have to say that the others are included, are subsumed under the religious motive and the religious motivation. Allow me to highlight some of the problems with these theories and why they are significant, because I think hopefully we presented them in a simple enough manner that anyone can use them. But we said these are very controversial because of where they may lead. So I'll just give you some hints, things to keep in mind for further research. The first issue or the first danger is associated with saying that the entire activities of the Imam need to be understood as though they are divinely appointed and almost mystical. What's the issue with that? If we say that they are only from that dimension, they are exclusively divinely appointed in that manner, the issue is that, practically speaking, we are going to ignore all the material causes in the life of the Imam. None of us can say that our behaviors are going to be divinely inspired. Therefore, we cannot take the behavior of the Imam and his revolution or his movement, whatever you may call it, we cannot use it and apply it in our lives and extract lessons from it. Because we have to say that this is entirely divinely inspired. It has nothing to do with our world. Everything is outwardly. Everything is from the afterlife and to the afterlife. Has nothing to do with the material world in which we live. So this is the danger with that interpretation. And that's why we add that there is a dimension that is beyond the religious here. That's on one side. On the other side, what are the dangers with saying that the Imam was only behaving in a political manner? And inshallah, I think that part is clear. The big danger is by saying that is to say that we are going to assess, first of all, the entire behavior of the Imam based on political success or political failure. When we're saying the movement of the Imam went way beyond the political world of his time and the immediate political consequences in his own time. That's one. Two, it goes against, if you push this argument long enough, it actually invalidates the theory of infallibility, the theory of imamah entirely, the theory of asma. By saying that the Imam, when this is combined together with the other argument, that the Imam would never have proceeded to go to Karbala had he known that he was going to be killed. The Imam moved to Karbala because he received letters from Kufa. He assessed that the situation was good and right and the timing was right, so he went to Kufa based on their call to him. And then the people did not rise up to the occasion, and the Imam basically miscalculated and he ended up being murdered. And that was tragic and that was bad and his intentions were good, but at the end of the day, this was a mistake on the part of the Imam. This is the danger with this version. Allow us to add a few more, and I think we answered all of this by now with everything that we have said, and we're going to add a little bit more. One more point or two more points that we want to add, because they come and in support of this theory that the movement of the Imam was political. Imam al-Husain alayhi salam, when he first moved, when he announced that he was going to move, he was in the holy city of al-Madinah al-Munawwara. And he gave sermons. And he made it clear right there and then that he was never going to give allegiance to someone like Yazid. Where he said in his sermon, someone like me does not pay allegiance to someone like him. The Imam openly declared his opposition to the rule of Yazid. And he made it clear where he was going. Why is that important? That's important because the letters of Kufa had not reached the Imam yet when he was in al-Madinah al-Munawwara. So no one can come back and say that the entire reason why the Imam did everything he did is because he got the letters from Kufa. The letters of Kufa reached the Imam when he was in Mecca. That's one. The second point is they say the Imam changed his mind. When did he change his mind? When he negotiated with Al-Hurr bin Yazid al-Riyahi to allow him to either go back where he came from or to allow him to go elsewhere. And then we are told in history that Imam alayhi salam, he had multiple discussions with Umar bin Sa'd directly and indirectly, in which he was asking him the same thing. He was negotiating with them to either allow him to go back where he came from or to allow him to go elsewhere. And they say this is because the Imam changed his mind. The Imam did not change his mind. The Imam was very clear from the beginning where he wanted to go, and he is reacting to the material context around him. That's one. Two, the Imam was actually creating a win-win situation for himself. The Imam is asking them to allow him to go elsewhere. If they allow him to go elsewhere, then the Imam gets what he wants, and he can recreate a base somewhere. Either he goes to Kufa, either he goes to Basra, either he goes anywhere else. And he can recreate a base and continue with his movement. If they do not allow him to go, if they do not accept his request, then this is going to expose the rule of Yazid and expose the nature of his rule. The Imam has not yet said this is a military campaign against Yazid. The Imam's movement until now is entirely peaceful. The Imam has not done anything to show that he is leading a military revolution against the government of his time. The Imam until now is simply saying, I reject this rule because it's not legitimate, and he is leading a social revolution. So if they do not allow the Imam to leave, then they are forcing the Imam in whatever they are forcing him in, and this is going to expose the nature of the military army of Yazid and what Yazid is trying to do. And in both cases, the Imam wins, because that is his mission, is to allow people to distinguish between right and wrong, because everything had been mixed up, the cards had been mixed up. And so people were not allowed to distinguish truth from falsehood. this entire discussion may seem that it is a little bit theoretical. So now let's try to take this entire discussion with all of these arguments and try to translate them in what I feel is a good translation for them, to translate them into a man. That man was one of the companions of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam. Someone who understood the complexity of everything we just described. Someone who understood that the conditions and the decisions and the sermons and the motives of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam were social and were political and were religious and even mystical and divine. Someone who could see all of this for its full complexity and take out and apply lessons from it in his own life. Let's start where we left off last night. The situation in Kufa. The Imam alayhi salam received the news that Muslim ibn Aqil and Hani ibn Urwa had been killed. And the Imam is known to have said at that time, there is no good in a life without these men, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Then he had already written, or he wrote a letter to one of his companions sitting in Al-Kufa. That man was Habib ibn Mudahir. Habib ibn Mudahir was a great companion of the Holy Prophet and a great companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali alayhi salam. We are told that he would come after every battle to Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he would fight alongside him, and he would see his companions and the companions of the Holy Prophet being martyred one after the other. He would come to Imam Ali alayhi salam and he would say, I'm seeing all my companions martyred and I'm not attaining martyrdom myself. Am I going to be martyred? And the Imam would tell him, not yet, but your time will come. This is the type of man that he was. This is the kind of patience and endurance and faith that this man had. So this man, we are told, was about 75 years old at that time. Habib ibn Mudahir. We are told that he was sitting in his house in Al-Kufa, and we know what just happened in Al-Kufa. We just said that tens of thousands of people had been killed. It's a very tense situation in Al-Kufa. Anyone who does anything to give the impression that they are affiliated with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, they are being captured and thrown in jail or being killed. And Hani ibn Urwa and Muslim ibn Aqil have just been captured and killed. And of course everybody knows that Habib ibn Mudahir is one of the biggest companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and who could be directly associated with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. So he needs to be very careful. So we are told that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam had written a letter to Habib ibn Mudahir and sent it with one of his companions, one of his messengers. The man came to Habib. Habib was sitting with his wife having dinner. And brothers and sisters here, allow me to take a little break. I know a lot of you are in that age where you have the luxury of deciding how to choose your spouse for the rest of your life. Please listen to the next lines of the story. Look at the kind of relationship this man had with his spouse, with his wife. Whether you're a sister or brother looking who to marry, marry someone who brings you closer to Allah. Marry someone who makes you stronger and who makes you better, who pushes you to become better even when it's difficult for them and difficult for you. And this is easier said than done. So the books of history tell us that the messenger of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam came to Habib, and he gave the letter to Habib. Habib opened the book, opened the letter. The letter said, this is from Husayn ibn Ali to the faqih Habib ibn Mudahir. These are great words from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. For an infallible imam to refer to a man as being a faqih. Today when we say a faqih, it means a jurist, a scholar who is an expert in legal matters. In that time when they said faqih, they meant someone who's an expert in all the sciences of Islam. Habib ibn Mudahir was known to be one of the greatest reciters and memorizers and interpreters of the Quran in Kufa. So Imam alayhi salam, when he talks to him, he says, from Husain son of Ali to the great faqih Habib ibn Mudahir. And then he continues by saying, you are a man of great dignity and honor, and you know better than anyone else our relationship from the Holy Prophet. And then he says, do not hold back your soul from us. In Arabic he says, وَلَا تَبْخَلْ بِنَفْسِكَ عَلَيْنَا. The Imam is telling him, I want your soul, I want your life. Do not hold back your life from me, I need it. So for someone to come and say that Imam Husain alayhi salam did not know that he was going to die is extremely inaccurate. Because not only did the Imam knew that he was dying, all of his companions also knew that they were going to die. But this is where we say that in any society, people who live and die by certain principles are considered heroes, and they abound. In every society we find soldiers and cops and firemen. They're willing to die for their principles. So when we find that some of the companions of the Imam are willing to die for their principles, we shouldn't take it as a shock, and even much less when it's the holy Imam himself. So he tells him, do not hold yourself or do not hold your soul or your life back from us. لا تبخل بنفسك علينا. And then he tells him, and the reward for this is going to be given to you by my grandfather, the messenger of Allah, on the day of judgment. Habib ibn Mudahir took the letter and wiped his eyes with it because he knew this was the writing of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And then his wife, who was sitting with him eating, she choked on her food, and then she told him, I hope that you're going to rush to the Imam and not delay. And he told her, of course, and I shall defend the Imam and die defending him until the white of my beard is filled with the red of my neck. The problem is that, as we said, in the city of Kufa, the conditions were very difficult. So the tribe of Habib started thinking maybe Habib wants to do something. And the tribe of Habib did not want to get any more involved in this difficult situation that everybody was in, or see more people from their tribe have their bloodshed. So they came to Habib and they told him, Habib, we think, or we heard, that you may be preparing to join the ranks of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. We hope that you're not willing to do anything like that. Our tribe is completely against it. We don't want to get involved and have any bloodshed between what's going on between Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Leave this between them. And Habib is said to have dissimulated his real interests and his real intentions, because he wanted to leave in secret. He knew that he would not be able to leave, that he would be captured like the rest who were captured. As we mentioned, the others had been captured, Maytham al-Tammar and al-Mukhtar and others. So Habib told them, no, there is nothing going on, don't worry about a thing. When he came back inside, his wife greeted him by crying and telling him, Habib, have you really truly changed your mind? Have you not heard what the Holy Prophet has said about Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam? That they are the youth of the paradise, the masters of the youth of paradise, that they are imams whether in peace or war. Are you just going to let them be? And Habib, he wanted to test her resolve. So he told her, I fear that if I join Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, you will become a widow. And my children and yours are going to become orphans. So she is said to have replied, I am not better than the woman of Bani Hashim, and our children are not better than the sons of the Prophet. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall be the best of protectors if you die. So Habib ibn Mudahir thanked her and told her, may God reward you for what you're saying. I have not changed my mind, and I shall rush to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And she told him, my last request from you is that you kiss the hand of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam and you send my salutes to him. And Habib sent one of his slaves with a horse outside to the city of outside the outskirts of the city of Kufa to wait for him at night, so that he could leave in secret. We are told that at that time the slave boy was waiting for Habib to show, but Habib was not showing. And finally Habib says when he was on his way to go to his horse in dissimulation at night, he heard the young slave talking to the horse, saying, your master is not showing up. If he does not show up soon, then I'm riding you and going to Imam al-Husayn myself without him. And Habib, when he came, he started crying and saying, oh Husayn, what kind of man are you that even the slaves want to rush you before the free man? And then he freed the man, and the man told him, I'm not leaving you, I'm coming with you to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. In the camp of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, we are told that the Imam had 12 banners. He had one big banner in the hand of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam and 11 smaller banners. But one of the banners was for the entire left flank. The right flank of the army of the Imam was in the hands of Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. The left flank still had no one to carry the banner, and so the companions of the Imam would come to the Imam asking if they could carry the banner. And the Imam would tell them, no, the man who shall carry this banner is coming soon, he hasn't arrived yet. And then we are told that at some point, and this was on the 6th of Muharram, we are told that there was a little bit of dust from the side of Kufa in Karbala, and they started looking in that direction, and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam told his companions and household, get up and get ready to receive Habib ibn Mudahir, he is finally joining us. When Habib ibn Mudahir reached the camp of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam heard that Habib has reached. This reassured the heart of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, and she was very happy, and she sent her salams to Habib. In our riwayat, it is said that he took sand from the dirt from the ground, and he put it on his head, and he said, who is Habib, for the daughter of Ali to send her salams to him. After those events, we are told that in the tragedy of Karbala as it unfolded, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, every time there was someone amongst his companions who would go out, the Imam would come to them when they are killed, and he would wipe out the blood and the dirt from off their face, and he would reassure them that the Holy Prophet is waiting for them. So when Muslim ibn Awsajah fell and he was about to die, the Imam alayhi salam rushed to him along with Habib. When they reached, Habib ibn Mudahir told Muslim ibn Awsajah, if I did not know that I was joining you shortly, I would ask you to tell me what your last testament is. And Muslim ibn Awsajah told him, may God give you glad tidings of the paradise. My only last will for you is to take care of this stranger, showing to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And then we are told that this 75-year-old man, this great companion of the Holy Prophet, fought valiantly until he was killed in the battle, and he was beheaded on the battlefield. And they attached his head around one of their horses to parade him. And when he was killed, we are told, his murder shook Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam to the point where he lost all his forces. And he stood in the entrance of his own tent, and he said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on your soul, Habib. You were one of those who would recite the Quran entirely every night. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the type of knowledge and the type of strength and the type of patience to recognize the complexity of the lives and the decisions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, as well as their divine ranks, and to be able to extract the lessons from their lives and from their decisions and reapply them into our own lives. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.